The conference room overlooked the Pacific glass walls, framing a horizon so calm it felt almost mocking. Inside, everything was anything but calm. All 7 rental properties in Hawaii are mine. My brother Ethan said, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. Olivia doesn't get anything. There was a beat just long enough for the words to land. Then my mother started clapping. My aunt joined her. Even the attorney offered a polite nod like this was all perfectly reasonable. I smiled, not because it was funny, not because it didn't hurt, because I'd been waiting for this exact moment. I turned my head slowly and looked at my father. Dad. You really don't know, do you? His hand froze halfway to his glass. His eyes flicked toward me, then toward Ethan, uncertainty creeping in like a crack in glass. Ethan's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood. Know what he snapped. What the hell are you talking about? I folded my hands in my lap, calm, steady, exactly the way I'd learned to be. Everything. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive cologne. Sterling and Hale had chosen their location, well top-floor ocean view, the kind of place that made people feel important just for sitting in it. Ethan sat at the head of the table like he owned not just the properties but the room, the building, maybe even the island itself. My mother leaned toward him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. You've earned this, sweetheart. 5 years managing everything. Your grandfather would be so proud. My father didn't say anything at first. He never did, not right away. He just nodded slowly like he was convincing himself. It makes sense, he finally added, his voice quieter. You've been handling it all, Ethan. Olivia. She has her own path. My own path. That was how they always phrased it when they meant less important. I kept my expression neutral, my breathing even. Years of military training had made that second nature. You don't react. You observe. You wait. Ethan leaned back in his chair, one ankle crossing over his knee, completely at ease. Look, I don't want this to be awkward, he said, though his tone suggested the opposite. It's just practical. I've been doing the work. I know the tenants, the properties, the numbers. Olivia? He shrugged, glancing at me with a half smirk. No offense, but you're in the Army. You don't exactly have time to run a real estate portfolio. A few quiet laughs circled the table. I didn't flinch. Instead, I studied my father. 74 now. His hair thinner, more gray than I remembered from childhood. But his eyes, those were the same. Sharp when it came to business. Selectively blind when it came to his children. Dad, I said again, softer this time. Did Grandpa ever talk to you about the properties? Specifically. He frowned, caught off guard. He said he had a plan, that everything would be taken care of. A pause. Why? And after he passed, I continued, did you ever check the county records, just to confirm ownership? The silence that followed was different from before, heavier, less certain. Why would I? He said slowly. Ethan was managing everything. Exactly. I let that sit for a moment, let it settle into the cracks already forming. Across the table, my Aunt Rebecca let out a short, dismissive laugh. Oh, for heaven's sake, Olivia, what are you getting at? This isn't one of your military interrogations. Ethan's patience was thinning. I could see it in the tightening of his jaw, the way his fingers tapped against the armrest. He didn't like not being in control of the conversation. Yeah, he said sharply. Spit it out. What do you think you know? I met his gaze, steady and unblinking. Enough, I said. 5 years. That's how long I'd sat through dinners like this. Listening, watching, letting them believe their version of me. The quiet daughter, the one who chose discipline over ambition, service over success, the one who wore a uniform instead of a tailored suit. They had no idea how much I'd learned in those 5 years. Not just in the Army, though, that alone would have been enough to change anyone, but before that. Long before Ethan ever touched a lease agreement or pretended to understand cash flow. When I was 16, my grandfather had pulled me aside during Thanksgiving dinner. The house had been loud, Ethan telling some story about a debate competition, my mother hanging on every word, but Grandpa Frank had always noticed what others missed. You're watching, he'd said quietly, handing me a cup of coffee I technically wasn't supposed to have. Not talking. Watching. That's where the real information is. I hadn't realized then how much that moment would matter. He started inviting me over on Saturday mornings after that. Just the two of us. No audience, no expectations. He didn't teach me like you'd teach a child. He spoke to me like I was already capable. Cap rates, cash-on-cash return, tenant screening, long-term appreciation versus short-term yield. I absorbed it all not because I was trying to prove anything, but because it made sense. It felt right. Ethan never came to those breakfasts. He was busy, or uninterested, or simply assumed he'd inherit everything anyway. And maybe that assumption was the biggest mistake he ever made. Back in the conference room, the attorney Mr. Hale shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Perhaps we should proceed with the formal documentation, he suggested, glancing between us. Ethan waved him off. In a second, his eyes locked onto mine again. You're acting like you've got some big reveal, he said. You don't. These properties are part of Grandpa's estate. I've been managing them. Everyone here knows that. Managing, I repeated. The word tasted different now. Yeah, he said, leaning forward. Managing, running them, keeping them profitable. Something you wouldn't understand. I almost smiled again. Instead, I reached into my bag slowly, deliberately. Not rushing, not dramatic, just precise. The room went quiet in that particular way it does when people sense something shifting, even if they don't understand what yet. My father watched my hands. So did Ethan. I placed my phone on the table and slid it toward the attorney. Mr. Hale, I said calmly, could you pull up the public property records for these addresses? He hesitated. I suppose I could? Yes. Good, I replied. I'll provide them. Ethan let out a sharp laugh. This is ridiculous. Maybe. Or maybe it was exactly what had been coming for 5 years. I leaned back in my chair, my posture relaxed, my pulse steady. Go ahead, I said softly. Let's see who actually owns them. Across the table, my father's face had gone pale. Ethan's smile was starting to slip. And for the first time since this meeting began, the balance of power in the room shifted quietly, but unmistakably. The attorney's fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain, waiting for anyone to stop him. No one did. Ethan leaned back again, forcing a laugh that came out thinner than before. Go ahead, he said, waving his hand. Knock yourself out. This is public record. It'll just prove what I already said. I didn't look at him. I was watching my father. He hadn't touched his water. His gaze was fixed on the screen now, his brow furrowed. Not defensive, not dismissive. Just confused. That was new. And confusion, I'd learned, was the first crack in certainty. I wasn't always this composed. There was a time when I would have reacted the way they expected, defensive, emotional, trying too hard to explain myself. I used to think if I just said the right thing, showed them enough evidence, they would finally see me. That was before I understood something fundamental. People don't see what they don't want to see. Growing up, Ethan was the center of gravity in our house. 3 years older, loud, charismatic, the kind of person who filled a room just by walking into it. Teachers loved him, neighbors praised him. My mother built entire conversations around him. Ethan's going to do big things, she'd say at dinner, her voice warm with pride. You can just tell. My father would nod, approving, already projecting some future version of him, successful, respected, carrying the Carter name forward. And me. I was the quiet one. The one who read more than she spoke. The one who listened instead of interrupted. The one who noticed things but didn't always say them out loud. Olivia's thoughtful, my mother would add, like she was searching for something positive to say. Thoughtful. It sounded nice, it wasn't. It was the word you used when you didn't quite know what someone was for. When I told them I was enlisting, my mother cried. Not proud tears, not the kind you see at airport goodbyes or graduation ceremonies. These were different. Why would you do that to yourself? She asked, her voice tight with disbelief. You got into good schools. You could have a real career. A real career, Ethan echoed from across the room, leaning against the counter with that same half-smirk he still wore now. Yeah, Liv. What are you gonna do, march around and take orders for the next 10 years? I remember standing there, duffel bag at my feet, the weight of it grounding me. I'm not taking orders, I said evenly. I'm learning how to lead. He laughed. Actually laughed. My father didn't. He just shook his head, slow and disappointed. You're walking away from opportunity, he said. From stability. The army it's not where you build a future. I met his eyes then, the same way I was doing now, years later in that conference room. Maybe not the kind you understand, I replied. That was the moment something shifted between us, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that I felt it. A quiet separation. Training stripped everything down. There's no room for assumptions in the army. No space for someone to coast on personality or reputation. You either perform or you don't. You either earn trust or you don't get it. It was the first environment where being quiet wasn't a disadvantage. It was an asset. I learned to read situations quickly, to listen for what wasn't being said, to process information without reacting to it immediately, to stay calm when everyone else wasn't. By the time I commissioned as an officer, I understood something I hadn't growing up. Strength doesn't have to announce itself. But even then, I didn't fully understand what my grandfather had been preparing me for. Not until I saw the properties up close. Hawaii wasn't just a location, it was a strategy. 7 rental properties spread across Oahu and Maui. Not flashy developments or risky investments, stable, well-positioned assets. Long-term tenants, consistent cash flow, carefully managed expenses. I still remember the first time he walked me through one of them, a modest but pristine home in Kailua. The air smelled like salt and plumeria, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway. Most people see paradise, he said, unlocking the door. I see structure, systems, sustainability. Inside, everything was clean, functional, intentional. Anyone can buy a property, he continued. Very few people can run one. He didn't simplify things for me. We sat at the kitchen table for hours going over numbers, vacancy rates, maintenance reserves, tax implications, local regulations that changed depending on the island, sometimes even the neighborhood. You're not just managing buildings, he told me. You're managing risk. Ethan never saw any of that. To him, real estate was a headline, a brag, a shortcut to status. To my grandfather, it was discipline. Back in the conference room, the soft clicking of keys filled the silence. Mr. Hale cleared his throat. All right, first property, beachfront duplex North Shore, transferred February 18th, 2019. Ethan leaned forward slightly, impatience creeping in. Yeah, that's right. Grandpa put everything under the estate that year. The attorney hesitated. Transferred from Frank Carter to... I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. The words hung there just out of reach. Across the table, my father's breathing had changed. Slower, heavier. Go on, Ethan said, sharper now. To who? Mr. Hale adjusted his glasses, squinting at the screen like maybe it would say something different if he looked hard enough. To Olivia Carter. Silence. Not the kind that fills a room. The kind that empties it. My mother blinked, her smile fading. That doesn't make sense. Ethan laughed again, but there was no confidence left in it now. Just disbelief. It's a mistake, he said quickly. Pull up the next one. Mr. Hale nodded, scrolling. Second property, condo unit Maui. Same transfer date. Same, he swallowed slightly, same owner. I could feel every eye in the room turning toward me now. I kept my gaze on my father. He looked like he was trying to reconstruct 5 years of reality in real time. Olivia, he said slowly, what is this? I exhaled quietly, the tension I'd been holding for so long finally starting to release, not explosively, not emotionally, just steadily. It's public record, I said. Ethan pushed his chair back abruptly, the legs scraping hard against the floor. No, this is some kind of error. There's no way. I've been managing these properties for 5 years. I know, I replied. 3 words. Carefully chosen. Because this wasn't the reveal. Not yet. This was just the beginning. Ethan's breathing had gone shallow, uneven, like his body was trying to keep up with a reality it hadn't agreed to yet. I've been managing them, he repeated louder this time, like volume could force the truth back into place. Every lease, every tenant, every payment. You think I wouldn't know if something like this happened? I finally looked at him. Not with anger. Not even with satisfaction. Just clarity. That's exactly the point, I said. The room didn't move. Even the ocean outside the glass felt distant now, like it belonged to a different world. Mr. Hale cleared his throat again, this time more carefully. There are 6 more properties listed here, he said, glancing between us. All transferred on the same date, all under Olivia Carter. My mother shook her head slowly, as if rejecting it physically might make it disappear. No, Frank wouldn't have done that without telling us. But he had. He just hadn't told them. It was February of 2019 when he called me. I was stationed in Virginia at the time, knee-deep in a rotation cycle, the kind where days blur into each other and sleep becomes optional. His voice on the phone was steady, but there was something underneath it, urgency maybe, or finality. Can you come out to Hawaii this week, he asked. Short notice, I replied, already mentally rearranging my schedule. But I can make it work. Good, he said. A pause. There are some things we need to take care of. He didn't explain over the phone. He never did. The house felt smaller when I arrived. Not physically, if anything, it was exactly as I remembered. Same wide windows facing the water, same worn wooden floors, same faint scent of coffee and salt air that seemed permanently embedded in the walls. But he looked different. Older, yes. That was expected, but also sharper in a way that didn't match his body, like everything that mattered had condensed into something more precise. He didn't waste time. We sat at the dining table, documents already laid out in front of him, perfectly aligned. 7 properties, he said, tapping the stack lightly. All stabilized, all profitable, all legally clean. I nodded, scanning the first few pages automatically. Deeds, transfer forms, legal language I recognized immediately. Why are you showing me this, I asked, though part of me already knew. He leaned back, slightly studying me the way he always had, not just looking but evaluating. Because I'm transferring them to you, he said. Just like that. No build-up, no dramatics. The words landed with weight anyway. I looked up, meeting his gaze. All of them. All of them. My first instinct wasn't excitement. It was calculation. Grandpa, I paused, running the numbers in my head. That's several million in assets, significant monthly cash flow, tax implications alone. I've already accounted for it, he cut in, not impatient, just efficient. The transfers are structured to avoid probate complications. Clean, immediate. I stared at the documents again, slower this time. This isn't an inheritance, I said quietly. No, he replied, it's a decision. I should have asked why. Instead, I asked the question that mattered more. What about Dad, I said, and Ethan? That was when his expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Your father made his choices a long time ago, he said. He never wanted the responsibility. He wanted stability, predictability. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't build anything. And Ethan, I pressed. A long pause. Then he exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding something back for a while. I gave Ethan an opportunity 3 years ago, he said. I let him take over day-to-day management, rent collection, maintenance coordination, tenant communication. That sounds like a lot of trust, I said. It was a test. I felt something tighten in my chest. And he reached for a separate folder, sliding it across the table toward me. Open it. I did. Bank statements, tenant records, payment logs. At first glance, everything looked normal. Then I looked closer. Dates didn't line up. Amounts didn't match. Units marked vacant when rent had clearly been paid. My stomach dropped. He's skimming, I said. Not just skimming, my grandfather corrected calmly. Systematically diverting funds, underreporting occupancy, charging tenants fees that don't exist in their leases and keeping the difference. I flipped through more pages faster now. How much, I asked. Approximately $120,000 over 3 years, he replied. The number sat there between us, heavy and undeniable. And you didn't confront him, I asked, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. I wanted to see if he would stop, he said simply. If he would recognize what he was doing and correct it. And he didn't. No. Silence stretched across the table. The kind that forces you to sit with what's in front of you. What do you want me to do, I asked finally. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table. I want you to take ownership, he said, legally, immediately. And Ethan? Let him continue. I frowned. Continue. Stealing. Continue revealing who he is, he said. I held his gaze, searching for hesitation. There was none. That's a risk, I said. Yes, he agreed, but it's a controlled one. You'll have full ownership, full legal protection. Every dollar he touches will be traceable. You want me to document it, I said. I want you to understand it, he corrected. Completely. We signed the documents that week. Every signature deliberate, every page notarized, filed, recorded. By the end of it, the ownership of all 7 properties had shifted entirely. From Frank Carter to me, Olivia Carter. Legally binding, public record. Invisible to everyone who never bothered to look. He passed away 4 months later. Peacefully, they said. At the funeral, Ethan stood at the front, speaking confidently about legacy, about responsibility, about carrying forward what his grandfather had built. He taught me everything I know about business, he told the crowd. I stood in the back listening. He hadn't. Not really. Back in the conference room 5 years later, Ethan looked like he was trying to breathe through water. This isn't real, he said, shaking his head. There's no way, I would have known. You would have known, I repeated quietly, if you had ever checked. My father's eyes moved between us, something unraveling behind them. You've owned this whole time, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Since February 2019, I said. 5 years, he murmured. 5 years of assumptions. 5 years of certainty built on nothing. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. This is fraud, he snapped. You can't just, this has to be some kind of setup. I tilted my head slightly. A setup, I echoed. His voice rose, desperation creeping in now. Yeah, you tricked Grandpa into signing something or forged it. There's no way he would cut me out like this. Mr. Hale shifted uncomfortably. The documents appear to be properly executed, he said carefully. Filed with the county, notarized. There's no indication of... Shut up, Ethan snapped. The room went still. I watched him for a moment. Really watched him. And for the first time I didn't see the golden child. I saw exactly what my grandfather had seen. Ethan, I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. He looked at me, eyes sharp, defensive. Yes, I continued, you've been managing these properties for 5 years. A pause. And that's exactly why we need to talk about what you've been doing with them. Ethan's eyes narrowed, instinctively defensive, but there was something else underneath it now, calculation. He was trying to get ahead of something he didn't fully understand yet. I've been doing my job, he said, forcing steadiness back into his voice. Keeping everything running, improving value. That's what management looks like. I nodded once. Is it? The attorney didn't move. My mother didn't speak. Even my aunt, who always had something sharp to say, stayed quiet. Because something in my tone had changed. Not louder, not harsher. Just final. I reached into my bag again, slower this time, and pulled out a thin black folder. Not thick, not dramatic, just precise. I placed it on the table and slid it toward Mr. Hale. This, I said, is a forensic audit of all 7 properties over the last 5 years. Ethan let out a short, incredulous laugh. A what? A complete financial reconstruction, I continued, ignoring him. Every rent payment, every expense report, every tenant record, cross-referenced with bank deposits, lease agreements, and maintenance logs. Mr. Hale hesitated before opening it, like he already sensed he wasn't going to like what he saw. You hired someone to do this, he asked. Yes. When? 3 years ago, I said. Ethan's smile faltered. Go ahead, I said quietly. Read the summary. The pages turned softly in the silence. Mr. Hale adjusted his glasses again, his expression tightening as he scanned. Unit 3, Kailua, he read slowly. March 2020. Rent collected $2,100. Reported vacant. A pause. He looked up. Ethan didn't. Continue, I said. April 2020. He went on, voice more careful now. Same unit, same tenant, same discrepancy. My mother's hand moved from the table to her chest. There must be an explanation, she said quickly, her voice thin. There is, I replied. Mr. Hale turned another page. Condo Unit Maui. Multiple instances of late fees charged to tenant not specified in lease agreement. Funds unaccounted for in official reports. Ethan pushed back from the table again, shaking his head. This is selective. You're cherry-picking numbers. Am I asked. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locked on his. 17 separate instances on that unit alone, I said. Over 2 years. He didn't answer. The room felt smaller now. The ocean outside still moved, waves rolling in slow, steady patterns, completely indifferent to what was happening inside. Total discrepancy, Mr. Hale said, carefully flipping to the final page over a 5-year period. He stopped. I could see the hesitation. Say it, I said. He swallowed. $186,340. The number didn't echo. It didn't need to. It just sat there. Ethan laughed again. But this time it broke halfway through. That's insane, he said quickly. That's not real. You're telling me I somehow stole almost $200,000 and nobody noticed. I noticed, I said. Silence. He looked at me. Then really looked at me like he was trying to reconcile the person in front of him with the version he'd carried in his head for years. That's not, he started, then stopped. You didn't say anything. No, I agreed, I didn't. Why, he snapped. If you thought something was wrong, why didn't you say something? I held his gaze. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. My father's chair creaked slightly as he shifted. Olivia, he said, his voice unsteady, are you saying? I'm saying, I cut in, still calm, still controlled, that for 5 years Ethan hasn't been managing these properties. I let that settle. He's been stealing from them. Another pause. Then softer. He's been stealing from me. My mother shook her head again, tears forming now. No, that's not fair. He thought he was managing them for the estate. He didn't know. It doesn't matter what he thought, I said. She flinched. Intent matters, she insisted weakly. Not in the way you think, I replied. I turned slightly toward her, not unkind but firm. If you take money that isn't yours repeatedly over years and you go out of your way to hide it, misreport it, disguise it, structure it, so no one notices, that's not confusion. I let the word hang. That's a pattern. Ethan's hands were clenched now, white at the knuckles. You set me up, he said, his voice low. I almost smiled. No, I said, I gave you space. His eyes flashed. That's the same thing. No, I repeated, it isn't. I leaned back in my chair again, the same way he had earlier, but without the arrogance. Just certainty. You had 5 years, I continued. 5 years to stop, 5 years to correct it, 5 years to come clean. I paused just long enough for it to land. You didn't. Mr. Hale closed the folder slowly, his professional composure slipping just slightly now. If this report is accurate, he said carefully, this constitutes multiple counts of financial misconduct. Potentially criminal. Potentially, Ethan snapped. The attorney didn't respond. I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out a second document. Thicker, official. I placed it on the table but didn't slide it forward this time. Not yet. What's that? My father asked, his voice barely holding together. I looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time since I'd walked into this room, there was no anger left in me. No need to prove anything. Just clarity. This, I said, is a formal complaint. Ethan went still. A complaint, he repeated. Yes, I said, prepared for the Hawaii Department of Law Enforcement. The words didn't hit all at once. They unfolded. Slowly. Relentlessly. You're not serious, my mother whispered. I didn't look at her. I am. Ethan's chair slammed backward as he stood up again. You can't do that, he said louder, now panic creeping in around the edges. You can't just, this is family, we can fix this. Fix what I asked? His mouth opened, then closed. The money, he said finally. I'll pay it back, whatever it is. Double, triple, just don't do this. I studied him for a moment. Not with anger. With understanding. Not of him. Of the situation. This isn't about the money, I said. Then what is it about, he demanded. I held his gaze. Accountability. My father stood slowly, like the weight of the room had finally become too much to sit under. You're going to destroy your brother over this, he asked, his voice breaking. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. He already did that. The room didn't recover after that. There are moments when everything fractures at once, when the version of reality people have been living inside collapses so completely that there's nothing left to hold on to. This was one of those moments. No one spoke for a while. Not because they didn't have anything to say. Because they didn't know where to begin. Ethan was the first to move. He dragged his hands through his hair, pacing now, the polished floor echoing each step too loudly. This is insane, he muttered. This is completely insane. He looked at my father. Say something, he demanded. You're just going to stand there. My father didn't answer right away. He was staring at the folder in front of him, the one that held 5 years of evidence, 5 years of silence, 5 years of truth no one had bothered to look for. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. Did you take the money, he asked. Simple. Direct. Unavoidable. Ethan froze. That's not, he started, then stopped. His eyes flicked to my mother, then back to my father. I didn't think. Did you take it, my father repeated. The room held its breath. Ethan swallowed. I adjusted some things, he said. Management fees, expenses, it's not like I just... Did you take money that wasn't yours? My father said again, each word heavier than the last. This time, Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. My mother let out a quiet, broken sound, covering her mouth with her hand. Ethan, she whispered, like saying his name might somehow pull him back into the version of him she believed in. But that version was gone. Or maybe it had never really existed. I stood up. Not abruptly, not dramatically. Just deliberately. I'm going to leave, I said. Every head turned toward me. I have a meeting with my attorney this afternoon, I continued. We'll be filing the complaint formally. Ethan's head snapped up. Olivia, don't, he said, stepping toward me. Just wait. We can figure this out. I paused, my hand resting lightly on the back of the chair. For 5 years, I said, not raising my voice, you figured things out exactly the way you wanted to. He flinched. This is the part where consequences catch up. My mother stood quickly, almost knocking her chair over. Please, she said, her voice trembling. He's your brother. The word hung in the air between us. Brother? It sounded different now. I looked at her, not coldly, not harshly, just honestly. Brothers don't do this, I said. She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. People make mistakes. One mistake, I said, maybe two. I let the silence fill the space after that. Not 5 years, I finished. My father stepped closer than he had been in a long time. I didn't know, he said quietly. I met his eyes. I know, I replied. And I meant it. That was the problem. I should have, he added, his voice rough. I should have asked. I should have checked. Yes, I said. No anger. Just agreement. Ethan let out a sharp breath, frustration boiling over again. "So that's it," he snapped. "You're just going to walk out, ruin everything, and then leave like you're above it." I picked up my bag. "I'm not above it," I said. "I'm just not part of it anymore." I walked to the door. Each step felt lighter than I expected. Not because this was easy, but because it was over. The waiting, the watching, the constant balancing between what I knew and what I let them believe. Over. "Olivia." My father's voice stopped me just before I reached the door. I didn't turn around right away. Did he know, he asked? "Your grandfather? Did he know Ethan was taking money?" I closed my eyes for a brief moment, remembering that conversation at the dining table, the quiet certainty in my grandfather's voice. "Yes," I said. I turned then, meeting his gaze one last time. "He gave him 3 years to stop," I added. "He never did." My father looked down, the weight of that settling into him. "He tried to tell me," he murmured. "He did," I said. And then softer. "You just didn't listen." I left the room without another word. Behind me, voices started to rise again. My mother crying, my aunt demanding explanations, Ethan arguing, denying, grasping for something to hold on to. I didn't stop. The next 48 hours unfolded exactly the way I expected them to. Because this wasn't impulsive. It was planned. Monday morning, I sat across from my attorney, David Lynn, in a quiet office far less dramatic than Sterling and Hale, but far more effective. He flipped through the documentation page after page, his expression sharpening with each one. "This is thorough," he said finally. "Very thorough." "I've had time," I replied. He nodded. "We'll file today." We did. By Tuesday afternoon, 2 investigators from the Hawaii Department of Law Enforcement had knocked on Ethan's door. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. He called me that evening. I let it ring twice before answering. "They're treating me like a criminal," he said immediately, his voice tight with panic. "You are one," I said calmly. There was a pause. "I'll pay it back," he said quickly. "All of it. I'll take out a loan, I'll sell my car, whatever it takes. Just call them. Tell them it's a misunderstanding." "That's not how this works," I replied. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. And I did. By Wednesday, the story had started to circulate. Not in headlines. Not yet. But in the networks that mattered. Property managers talk, investors talk, firms pay attention when numbers don't add up. Ethan's name started appearing in conversations it had never been part of before. None of them good. By Friday, he'd been placed on administrative leave from his firm. By the following week, he was terminated. Quietly. Efficiently. Just like everything else in the world, he thought he understood. My mother called 3 times before I answered. "Please," she said when I finally picked up. Her voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. "He's falling apart. He's your brother." I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the city lights through my apartment window. "He made choices," I said. "We'll fix it," she insisted. "We'll pay you back. Your father and I, we have savings retirement accounts." "It's not enough," I said gently. Silence. And even if it was, I continued, it wouldn't change anything. "You're destroying this family," she whispered. I closed my eyes briefly. "No," I said. "I'm just not protecting it anymore." My father came to see me the following Saturday. He looked older. Not in years. In weight. "I was wrong," he said as soon as I opened the door. No preamble, no defense. Just that. I stepped aside to let him in. We sat across from each other in silence for a while. "I chose him," he said finally, over and over again. "I see that now." I didn't interrupt. "I thought I was supporting him," he continued, "encouraging him, but I was ignoring everything else." "Me," I said quietly. He nodded. "You," he agreed. He looked up then, meeting my eyes with something I hadn't seen there before. Not pride. Not expectation. Recognition. "I don't know how to fix this," he said. I considered that. "You don't?" I replied. The truth simple and unsoftened. Months later, Ethan accepted a plea deal. Reduced charges, probation, restitution, a permanent record that would follow him far longer than the money ever could. His career in real estate was over. His reputation gone. We don't speak much now. My parents and I exchange occasional calls, holidays sometimes. Careful, polite. Different. A few weeks ago, my father sent me a letter. Handwritten. No expectations attached. Just acknowledgement. He told me he'd looked into my records, my service, my promotions, the properties. He said he was proud. I keep it in a drawer. I haven't responded. Not because I'm angry. Because I don't need it anymore. I built something real. Not loudly. Not for approval. But with discipline, with patience, with clarity. And in the end, that was enough. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or quietly dismissed by the people who should have known you best, I want you to think about something. What would happen if you stopped trying to prove yourself and started building something undeniable instead? Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I read more of them than you think, and if this story resonated with you, subscribe. There are more stories like this, real complicated and worth hearing. Let's keep going together.